Yeah, I know this. Or I hope my husband and I talked about we might go to Mexico and beverages.
And that's where I think the son is there and grandson.
Right. We'll go to the
Oh, you do lots of creative things. Oh, I like that.
Oh, I didn't make that.
This woman here, oh, she made it.
She made so when we went on our first trip, we went to Kentucky with an civil rights movement. And it just so happened the night we were there, this woman was there, and I'm going to blank on her name. I think her last name is Williams.
Oh my God, I love it.
She got a grant to make quilted civil rights swing coats.
No.
And what she did is she took women, kind of like less familiar women from the civil rights era, and each coat was dedicated to one of those women.
Oh,
And I've actually been trying to work on getting her to come here. She's out of California to display at the Custom House.
oh,
And they're
right down
interested.
the street.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I would definitely.
But I think it's, fiber arts, civil rights.
Her name, it says Patricia Montgomery.
Thank you. That I really
Oh, but
had trouble with
I
that.
think that is whole history right in there.
Right, kids would come, fiber artists would come, and we just happened to be there the night she was there, and I got to meet her, and I've been in touch with her since. And she's very interested in coming too. So yeah, I put a lot of everywhere I went, it seemed like even at the Clinton Museum, they had a whole floor dedicated to women's rights, and we had all these beautiful quilts based on women's rights. We went to the regular museum in Alabama. I think I can remember this one not mistaken. And they had what's her name? I always don't know her name. She's out of New York, but she does story quilts and all things and everything. I said her name. I remember her.
Oh, no.
Kate Baer.
Okay.
And they had a quilt of hers there. My goal is to get to see this other quilt artist and so pictures and portraits of it's just not as much need to. So when do you think we'll get?
Oh, definitely in the next 2 years.
I don't miss her.
You don't miss it at all.
I miss the people, religious people, but I don't miss having to be with her unless I want to.
I have 37 years, so I can go and I just don't want to leave my team. We're up in the air right now. I want to make sure they're comfortable.
Wow, 37. I mean, I've worked for 45 years, but not 37 years.
Yeah, and moving different agencies, but with the
So your retirement.
it should be very good. Yep.
I had the option. We're with University of Pittsburgh, and they have a thing that the rule of 85, and if your years of service plus 10 and your age equals 85, you get full benefits, health care.
Very
I was. No, I'm not working for you.
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, you know about tomorrow with the Juneteenth celebration at the baseball field?
I do because I'm friends with Floyd, so I do.
Oh,
But the only thing is, there are so many competing things. Because I'm going to be at Shippensburg in the middle, like there's something in the afternoon, and I do line dancing. So I've been asked to do line dancing, but there's going to be a band, DJ, all kinds of stuff going on. So that's in the afternoon, and then the evening, the governor is having some celebration. So can't call myself and get every.
Well, you know Hetty Love?
Yes, we do.
Okay, well, she's a good one. We go to her church.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah, because she's been there
I think
forever.
she's just I
So
really,
she throws the first pitch.
yeah.
So my husband and I got a suite after the game. We sold the tickets to the Union of Black Presbyterians because I'm a member in our church. So we're going to have a big celebration. We'll get a cake and everything.
Oh, nice. Take it.
Oh, I will. Well, I think everybody will be taking. My husband went over there yesterday to coach her on how to throw the ball.
She's so feisty. She probably do a
He
good
said
job.
she was really good. He said, I couldn't
I
believe
believe
it.
it. I do. I believe. I believe it.
That woman's amazing.
Oh, she's 100. Hard to believe.
Yeah, she's gonna hit 101. We missed her. We were actually, yes, I think her birthday's in October because we were doing part of our trip and missed her birthday party, and that
Okay.
was in October. So.
Okay. Yep.
And she seems just as healthy and lively.
Mm-hmm.
Her husband was.
Oh,
we
yes.
just left
Dr.
him.
Love. Yes. And I know the daughter, Karen.
Okay.
I don't know her son because I only thought it was just a daughter, but she has a son.
Well, he lives in another state, I believe.
Okay.
I'm not, because we don't see him very often. But yes, Karen.
Karen is her
wonderful.
right hand.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He'll be there too.
Yep.
Well, we never see him as well without Karen, vice versa.
Yep.
But they, guess they're very, are you in her sorority or?
They're AKs.
Yes.
Both of them. Yep.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Midtown Scholar Bookstore. My name is Alex. I'm with the Scholar. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're happy you're here. We hope you enjoyed tonight's program with Christine Pride and Joe Piazza. Before we begin, some quick housekeeping to go over. One, we have many events coming up in the next few months, including programs with Colson Whitehead, James McBride, Riley Sager, Ruth Ware, Mary Louise Kelly, and Lisa Jewell. Please take an events flyer as you leave and stay tuned to our social media pages, e-newsletter, and website for updates and announcements. Two, this event is part of our monthly Bookstores Love Libraries partnership with libraries across Pennsylvania. We're thrilled to be partnering with select libraries across the region. So a special shout out to Hershey, Lancaster, Dauphin, Cumberland, and Frederickson libraries for partnering with us on this event. What it means for you, show your library card at checkout for 10% off any purchase this evening, and you'll also receive a free coffee or tea. Lastly, we encourage you to come away with a signed book this evening. Joe and Christine will be sticking around to sign books after the event. Book sales are the bedrock of sustainability for our free author event series, and every purchase helps support the authors, the bookstore, and our staff. But at this time, I'm happy to introduce our speakers. Kate Baer is the 3 times New York Times bestselling author of And Yet, What Kind of Woman, and I Hope This Finds You Well. Her work has also been published in The New Yorker, Literary Hub, Huffington Post, and The New York Times. Christine Pride is a writer, editor, and longtime publishing veteran. She's held editorial posts at many different trade imprints, including Doubleday, Broadway, Crown, Hyperion, and Simon & Schuster. As an editor, Christine has published a range of books with a special emphasis on inspirational stories and memoirs, including numerous New York Times bestsellers. As a freelance editorial consultant, she does select editing and proposal content development, as well as teaching and coaching, and pens a regular column, Race Matters, for Cup of Joe. She lives in New York City. Lastly, Joe Piazza is a best-selling author, podcast creator, and award-winning journalist. She is the national and international best-selling author of many critically acclaimed novels and nonfiction books, including We Are Not Like Them, Charlotte Walsh Likes to Win, The Knockoff, and How to Be Married. Her work has been published in 10 languages in 12 countries, and 4 of her books have been optioned for film and television. She holds an undergraduate degree from the University of Pennsylvania in economics and communication, a master's in journalism from Columbia University, and a master's in religious studies from New York University. Of course, Piazza and Pride's new novel is titled You Were Always Mine. Jodi Picoult writes, quote, "The work of Joe Piazza and Christine Pride sits squarely at the tender intersection of race, class, and ethics, wrapped in beautiful prose and a killer plot that keeps you turning the pages," end quote. We're delighted and honored to welcome Joe, Christine, and Kate to Harrisburg. So please join me in giving them a warm Harrisburg welcome.
Do you want to sit down? Oh, a big co-author. Am I ready? I'm like, make sure you're hydrated. Hello, Harrisburg. I'm so happy to be here. This is my local bookstore. And I like to say before every event, on behalf of myself and these two beautiful women, Jeff Bezos doesn't give a shit about authors, but places like Midtown Scholar really support us in
Amen.
incredible ways. So
It's true.
we're so honored to be
Yes.
up here.
Yeah.
Yes, we love
Yes.
it. Thank you
I
guys
love
so
that. I'm
much for
gonna
coming out.
Steal that actually. I think I'm just gonna
Yeah,
start
you
saying
can.
that.
It's a great
Mhm.
line. It's a great opener. And I say at every bookstore. Okay, first of all, I love this book. It just came out yesterday, so I'm guessing that most of you haven't read it. But I love it so much. I was lucky enough to get an early copy of it. It came in the mail. I have to be honest, I get a lot of books that are sitting in my office that I've never read. I accidentally opened it and I read it in one day. I could not put it down. Yeah, there's just some books like that. And this was one of them. I needed to know what happened. And I'm going to try really hard today not to spoil anything because there are a lot of things we can't talk about.
There's a lot of things
Yeah.
that happen in the book.
But
and,
I
yeah.
loved it so much. I've given it to all my friends. Anyway, before we tackle the heart of it, I'd love to hear how this book came to be.
Yeah.
This is not, if you don't know this is not their first book they've written together. And so I would love to know how you came to write another one, also how you came to write another one about race, and if you knew you would tackle that topic again.
Yes. Is the short answer. Our first book together was We Are Not Like Them. And
I see a couple in the audience,
yes,
which
yes,
is
yes,
fun.
yes.
Yes.
And we keep joking that we have to stop putting so many pronouns in our titles because we've really been messing it up in some interviews. We're like,
We
were
are
always
you all fine.
And so when we sold that first book, we knew that our second book was also going to be about race in intimate spaces. And we had the rough sketch of that book already. And our goal has been to use fiction and just really great characters to be able to start those conversations about race and social justice that are so hard to have, that, people are nervous about having. And with We Are Not Like Them, we saw that in spades. We went to more than 200 book clubs. We were zooming into people's houses for 2 years from all over the world too. We would be on vacation like with our families and we're just like, oh yeah, hey Mary, how you doing? Yep. But it was so worth it because people would just start the conversation they'd been afraid to have for a long time. And this book is different from We're Not Like Them in that it tackles the idea about motherhood and race and privilege.
And we always are so as readers. I mean, as you can imagine, we're passionate readers like you guys do. And we love a story that puts the reader, into a dramatic situation, right? Like, oh my God, what would you do in this situation? And that was the germ of the idea too for our first book, We Are Not Like Them, which was, what would happen to this friendship between a Black woman and a white woman under this, very dramatic and hot button and, headline grabbing set of circumstances. And the first book is a police shooting. And in this story, the same idea, like what would happen if a Black woman found an abandoned white baby, and everything that would unfold in the aftermath of that. And it's like such a simple premise in a way, right? I mean, the abandoned baby situation is pretty dramatic in and of itself, but then when you add this idea that we are so used to seeing, white families with Black and brown children, and that is so ingrained in pulp culture and stories and movies and, real life walking down the street, and then just like a really simple kind of skin tone exchange, and it becomes a whole new ball game. And what that opens up in terms of the conversations that we can have about, these topics in the same way we had the conversations with We Are Not Like Them. So that was the goal, at least, Kate.
Yeah, it was. Another huge topic is motherhood, which you just touched on. And I know you both approach that because I know you a little bit in different ways with different backgrounds and experiences. And I would love to hear about how your personal life has informed the story And what were those conversations like between you? Because this book is very much about motherhood as well.
For sure.
wanna
You
go?
know, yeah, I'll go. So when for our first book, one of the things that we really leaned into and leveraged was our different perspectives, right? I mean, that is why we decided to write together, to write, you know, as a Black woman and a white woman, who have obviously very different experiences in the world, and how that was going to inform the story. And it's the same way with this book, right? Because Jo is, I'm going to not get the count of her children right. She has, what is it?
There's
3 now.
only 3 of them. It's not that crazy. Not that
I'm
crazy.
like,
Christine's always like,
it's so many. So when you-
children. And people in the audience are like, does she have like 10?
I know they're
kids or
thinking she has like
something?"
10 or 12, and I'm like 3. But when you have 0, it is a big
You're like,
difference.
that's a lot. That's a-
It's triple.
But the fun part is Christina's been there for all 3 of my children, because what we didn't say is that she was my editor first for my novel, Charlotte Walsh Likes to Win. And I turned in that manuscript right before I gave birth.
Yes. To the copy edit within newborn.
Right. So we had to do the copy edit, but I had this like breastfeeding newborn, and I was holding him and feeding him while she sat next to me on a couch and typed in my copy edits. I'm like, that is a dedicated editor.
You know, the
Yeah.
extra mile, right?
Extra mile. Every time.
Somebody
And
last night joked like, so it's a baby a book, a baby a book, a baby a book. I'm
seems
like,
like
actually,
that's exactly what happened.
100%.
Dare you.
But for my part, I'm child free by choice. And so we really do have these really different perspectives, both in terms of, you know, the decisions that we've had around procreation and, you know, reproduction, but also the world treats women differently if you have kids and you don't have kids, you know. You just have a very different way of walking in the world, and people, you know, conversations, how people react to you, questions they ask you, you know, are very different. And so we wanted to lean into those 2 different perspectives for this book, and really, you know, tackle motherhood from the angle, also from an angle that we don't see as much, which is, you know, there are a lot of stories post motherhood almost, right? Like the memoirs about motherhood and experience of motherhood. But we don't see as much about the decision to have a child, and how complicated that decision can be. And if you do decide, if you don't decide, right? The ambivalence about motherhood, the timing, I mean, all these things, the gray areas of that and the complexities are what we're very interested in.
Yeah. It is funny. I was doing an interview earlier. Christine was in the shower, so I took it. There's 2 of us, so we get to like, really just like
I gotta get on this
divide and
train.
I know, it
conquer
really
stuff.
is divided.
That alone.
I wish I could show you our text. Joe's like, can you do an Instagram live in 20 minutes? And I was like, I just got out of the shower. Can you handle this? She's like, got it. It's like, that is our
That is
collaboration
goals.
right
That is
there.
goals. Yeah. But I said on that interview, you know, Christine gets asked questions about why don't you have kids all the time, right? Like, well, what's going on? Is there something wrong? And I get questions like, 3, you're not going to have another one, are you? And I'm like, we're damned if we do, damned if we don't.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Yes, I have 4 accidentally, and I yes.
You feel like that's a lot though, right? That is a
It's
lot of
way
children,
too
right?
many. And everyone agrees. Don't worry. Okay, yes. So Daisy and Cinnamon are 2 of the characters in the story, and they're both mothers. And their just this kind of leads into this. That last question is, they're both mothers, but they're different mothers, and I'm wondering. It kind of begs the question, what is a good mother? And I would love to hear, you know, kind of what that means in 2023 too. You kind of already talked about this, but it felt like a very timely story because of that.
Yeah. Just to, you know, give you some timing for the book, when we had the idea, it was 2018, and we turned in the book right before the Roe v. Wade decision. But then it felt so much more fraught after the decision came out. And we really wanted to explore those ideas the whole time. You know, what does it mean to be a mother? Is motherhood a privilege? Is motherhood a right? Who deserves to be a mother, and to who? And one of the things we wanted to take on with Cinnamon is a character that we don't usually see in fiction, which is the woman who's completely ambivalent about being a mother. And for I mean, both of us, that was really important to
Mhm.
show that view of motherhood and that kind of switch that happens in her. Daisy and Cinnamon also aren't the only mothers in the book. You have both of their mothers who were on very different paths and who chose different paths. And so we're kind of hoping that there's a little something in here for anyone, be it a mother or a daughter, and that you can see yourself in those characters.
But also it's, we have so many judgments about mothers. I mean, I think that's a
Oh
great
my
question that you framed. Like it's what's a good mother? And that is, the kind of question that hovers in our society that everybody feels like they have, a right to say, you're a good mother, you're a bad mother, you should be doing this, you shouldn't be doing this, you should have the baby, And we wanted to take that and I mean, invite readers to judge our characters too, right? I mean, they are making, decisions and choices and,
A lot of people won't agree with.
yeah, that people won't agree with. But in terms of those decision and choices, the reason that we write, and we hope that we write with a lot of, like we said, nuance and complexity, is so that you can, try to understand those choices, right? And try to look at the motivations behind them and the circumstances around them. And so it's not just a judgment with no, details or context or empathy, right? It's an understanding of this character might have thought this way because of this reason, their background, what is happening in their life at the moment, the options that they have or do not have, right? And so we can see a more well-rounded, we hope, world around making these choices that don't, as much as we might like them to, or think they do, boil down to something as simple as I will be a mother, I won't be a mother, right? Like it's never that easy.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked it too, because, and I don't think this is a spoiler, but our one character is Daisy, and she is a 19-year-old girl who gets pregnant, and she is the one who abandons her baby. And at one point, another character calls her a monster. They say,
Mhm.
what kind of monster abandons a baby? And you get to know Daisy and her circumstances, and you realize that desperate people make desperate choices. And whose place is it to judge those choices unless you've walked in their shoes?
Oh, you guys, you have to read it.
No, it's so hard for me not to give spoilers, guys.
I know it's really hard.
Yeah, let's talk about Jason. He is speaking of
Monsters.
monsters. He is really tough to root for, and I would
Yes.
love to hear where his character came from and how did you want to use him in this story?
Mhm.
So Jason, I said this last night. It's funny. I feel like Jason is the guy that, the good on paper guy. This is Cinnamon's husband. And again, we don't want to give too much away, but as the story unfolds, you understand and come to learn a lot more about Cinnamon's past and what she's had to deal with and go through. And as the novel opens, she has a great job that she enjoys, and she's been married to her husband, Jason. And life is like good, right? Like good enough. And she has all of this stability and happiness and contentment that she never thought possible in her life. And so with Jason, in a way, and why we wrote him to do that is he embodies that, right? It's like if I meet this guy who's charismatic and on his way to be successful and has a real, vision and a real strong personality, and I can hitch my wagon, right, to this person, and the two of us can create a life together that is beyond the life that I think I could have done on my own. And that is a really seductive promise to a lot of people. And so Cinnamon falls into this seductive promise. And then the question becomes, when she wants more, when she wants something different, when she really like kicks the tires on their relationship a little more because of how she's coming to her own, then she has to ask herself the question, under these new set of circumstances, is this the right person for me? And that is a question. It's a very dramatic set of circumstances we put Cinnamon in to ask that question, but we feel like it's a really universal question of relationships, of friendships, of marriages, right? Are we growing together or are we growing apart? Are we going to continue to want the same things, or do we want different things in life? And that, does come up obviously routinely in our lives. It's an unavoidable conundrum.
Yeah, and I think that Cinnamon she's gone through so much. She has so much trauma and shame in her past. And she has a lot of questions about what do I deserve and who do I deserve? And when she first meets Jason, she's like, do I even deserve him?
Mhm.
And as they settle into their marriage, she definitely doesn't think that she deserves more until she's faced with extraordinary circumstances and finally believes that she does. But I think I can really relate to that. And all through my 20s, I was like, oh, do I deserve this guy or that guy, or I'm not good enough for them? And I think so many women have gone through that. And
Or this guy chooses me,
this guy
and so
chooses me, and so
that
that's
is
special.
an estimate of my worth,
Mhm.
right? I mean, especially if you've had some trauma, some issues, bad relationships, whatever, like that becomes a really, the being the chosen one and seeing what somebody, I mean, somebody even says this at some point in the book, like seeing what somebody sees in you, is a real confidence boost for her. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, Jason is not, everything again, gray. It's not 100% bad or good. And he serves a real purpose in her life in terms of giving her, a sense of self-worth. The irony is we should never get our self-worth from somebody else. And yet,
We don't know that for so long.
yeah, and yet,
Sorry.
that is like a real thing, right? That happens.
There's a line that says, she says, maybe, just maybe, if she has lost her mind, it's about time, which
Oh,
also
I love that
feels
line,
like
yeah.
a theme for the book.
Yeah.
She needs to kind of go through that.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, especially if you're really conservative in your life choices, is if you're really safe, like you feel like I'm doing the responsible thing, I'm doing the mature thing, I'm doing the right thing, I'm going to keep my life, really contained and safe, and make good choices for myself. And then when it feels like you have the option or opportunity, or there's a crossroads, right, where that you're not making the safe choice or the popular choice or the conventional choice, that's really scary. And I think it does make us all feel a little bit crazy, like when Joe and I started working together, and we had for our first book, we sold it and then we had a pretty quick deadline to finish it. And so I quit my job that I'd done for 20 years at Simon & Schuster. And I knew it was the right decision and a decision I need to make. But again, it's the point, like, you feel like, have I lost my mind?
Mhm.
Like, what am I doing? And so that comes up too a lot in our lives.
Well, let's talk about that. This is a very selfish question, but I have a million questions within this question, but I'll try to keep it brief. How do you write with two authors? What's it like to do? I want to hear like the nitty gritty logistics, like the pros and cons. And I also want to hear about how you kill each other's darlings.
Oh, yeah.
That's my number one question. I
Mercilessly.
yeah.
We don't kill all of the darlings,
Yeah.
though. Yeah, we each claim a darling.
It's
We each
true.
get one
But you
in the
have to
book,
be
you
really
know?
vocal about it. You have to say, like,
Yes,
this is my thing.
do not
Do not touch it. Yeah.
do not erase it. Don't erase it. In the beginning, it was so fucking hard.
Beep. That was late. Usually I try to catch her cursing before.
That deserves a fucking.
It did. It did.
Because I was also used to Christine being my editor, and when you make suggestions as an editor, and Christine is a great editor, probably one of my best editors. I'm being very careful because I usually say she's the best editor I ever had. And when we were at our New York event, and I was like, there were two other editors that I work with in the audience. I'm like, and you, Maya, and you too, all of you are so great.
She amended that real fast. She was like, "What? One of?" Like,
but I mean, she's great, but she's also gentle. She's like, this is your choice. She's like, this is what I think. Like, it's a suggestion. And if it vibes with you, and if it doesn't, like, no harm, no foul. But when you're co-writing a book, that is not the case. And the first time that I handed Christine part of the book that we wrote together, and she just deleted a ton of stuff and then rewrote it, I was like, why do you hate me so much? And so we had to learn, like, to communicate. And I compare it to a marriage a lot. As much as I communicate with my husband about, maybe even more so sometimes, about like wants and needs and why are you doing something, not just this whole chapter is gone. And
Mhm.
so we're really careful to be like, oh, okay, I think we should change this because this character needs to be doing an action here, or this should be in dialogue, or actually I did just hate this thing. And we do that we do work in Google Docs. So we do that in comments as we go through, and we'll work in suggestion mode. So I can kind of see Christine's whole thought process as she goes through, instead of something just being ripped out.
Yeah.
And because that was hard. It was really, because you're so vulnerable when you write, and then to have someone else just take it and completely redo it. I'm like, oh, did I waste all this time? But then now it's actually so helpful because we're used to it. Like, it's a beautiful thing to have someone be like, oh, the pacing is off. We have to fix
Right.
this.
Yeah, I think it is just a matter of like communication. And this book, it was so much easier to write because we had so much easier. We had worked out a lot of the kinks, and we are not like them. Like, it's like probably, I mean, again, we just keep comparing it to a marriage. And I'm not married, so I don't know why I keep doing this. I have no authority to actually say what I'm about to say next. But I imagine it's like when you say the first year marriage is really hard, right? Because you're figuring so many things out or living with each other. It's like, do we do this? Do you do the dishes? Do you, and then once
That's
you,
exactly what it was
is
like.
that
Yeah.
right? Okay. There's like a lot of fight about the dishes, I hear.
Read How to Be Married. Yeah.
Which I haven't. It's a
Yeah,
good book.
it's nice.
But once we got that learning curve worked out, and I think, in the beginning, it's so much of feeling each other out. And now we can really benefit in our collaboration, our partnership from playing to each other's strengths, right? So it's less about the ego of like, what am I writing? What are you writing? But, more about the trust aspect of like, if you change this, you have a good reason for doing that, and vice versa, right? Like it's we know why we're doing the things. It's not just on like principle or because like I like it more. It's like to serve the purpose of the story. And if you can make a case about why this works for the story, sure, there's no argument there.
But in the early days, I think both of us just thought that the other one knew.
Yeah.
Much
I
like
think
in
there was
a
a lot
marriage
of just like
relationship, it's like, you know why I'm
assumptions.
doing this. It's like, no one knows. You have to tell me.
Yeah.
I love that. And thank you for saying Google Docs suggestion mode. I wanted to know that exact detail. Thank you.
Yes,
Um,
yes. Well, but I will tell you. So Christine,
Oh boy.
you know what I'm going to say,
I do.
would only work in Word docs in the beginning.
Oh,
Hey, what do
yeah.
you write in?
Google Docs.
Oh, do you? You
Because
do?
every sane person does. And
Yeah.
because publishing is, still technologically based in 1997.
Right.
And
I love a Word
I
doc. I'm just
hate a Word doc.
saying.
I say this so often that someone from Microsoft was in the audience once and they're like, can we send you the new version of Word? I'm like, no, you can't.
I don't want it. I don't want it.
And so
I
I
don't want it.
convinced
I don't
Christine
want
that
it.
she had to do Google Docs. That was our first fight. And now she's a total convert.
And I mean, it actually would. I mean, Joe makes the point all the time. Like we would have had to trade 1,000 Word documents back and forth.
Yes.
And I didn't think through, like all the iterations of that. And so Google Docs is probably the only way that we could have worked together, but it is, it does work.
It was
I can see
buggier a
it.
few years ago too.
It has
Like,
gotten
it's
better.
Better.
Times
Yeah.
it's getting better now.
This book would make an incredible miniseries, and I want to know
yes, it
if
would.
you have a dream cast.
Oh.
I think it could ever happen.
Wow. I actually haven't even we spent so much time thinking and casting We Are Not Like Them, which has been optioned and which we have been working on the TV pitch for. And so
I mean, this is ripe for a miniseries.
I
I
agree.
actually think that this, and I'm just gonna say it. Christine's like, stop it. She's like, I hate it when you say things on the fly. I think this would make a better miniseries than We Are Not Like Them.
Or equally good.
Sure.
Or
yeah.
equally good.
Yeah.
But
Because
I
Just as
think
good, like just the same level of goodness.
both get made. Yes, they're both good.
movies are fine, but I think with a miniseries, you can really take your time.
Yes,
There's a
that's
lot
the
to
thing.
take
There's
your
a
time and
backstory. Yeah.
There's a ton of backstory, and I think it could really work well in a miniseries. Yeah.
Did you picture anybody when you were reading it?
Because we have not cast
Yeah,
this
we
at all.
really have not
Never
thought
cast
about
it.
it.
But I read this when I got the galley, which is really, I've read so many books since then.
Yeah, a long
But I
time
know
ago.
that when I was
Yeah.
reading it, that was one of my first thoughts. Reading
Mhm.
like, oh, this should be a miniseries.
Yeah. We'd have to think
Oh, let's do it
about
on the fly.
it.
Let's do it on the fly.
Okay, she might be, since Daisy's only 19, I think this woman is a little bit older, but she was in a a movie where she was in a beauty pageant. Southern.
The dumpling?
Yes.
Dumpling.
Yes. Dumpling with the blonde hair. Wait,
Yeah,
wouldn't she be
yeah,
a good
she would be
Daisy
good.
with the blonde,
Yeah,
with the curls,
yeah, like
and that
5
side?
years ago.
Yeah. Do
Anyway,
you
you
think
guys
she's
get
like?
on that and then send me the link.
Yeah,
for
okay,
this
we'll do
outing.
it, yeah.
I would really appreciate
But that was such a
that.
great movie. I
That's a really great movie.
That's cute.
Yeah, no.
Is there anything you hope people take away from this book?
Oh my gosh, so many things. I mean, I think I really want us to question what it means to be a mother in our world, because I think that we all mother in different ways and we are mothered in different ways. And the judgments that we put on mothers. And every time that I put something out, a personal essay that is about motherhood, people come at you in the comments. And with We Are Not Like Them, we prepared for a lot of feedback. It was about, a police involved shooting. We're like, this is such a hot button issue. People are going to have thoughts, and we prepared for every scenario. And not
It
a lot of them
wasn't. Yeah. We
happened.
didn't.
We just didn't come. And with this one, we didn't prepare because we're like, oh, it's a little more heartwarming. It's about a Black woman finding an abandoned baby and caring for
Everybody
them.
loves babies.
Everybody loves babies. Everyone loves mothers. No, they
Wrong.
there is so much judgment about everything Cinnamon does in this book. In comments, and we think that's fascinating. And the one thing that we want to say back is that if anything makes anyone uncomfortable, ask yourself why. What about this moment is making you uncomfortable?
And also, we really wanted this book to be a celebration of chosen family, and all the different ways that we become families. And in our society, there's such a clear view of, the right way to become a mother and motherhood. And there's this idea of, the nuclear family, and everybody's married and has 2 kids and lives the whole, dream. And that is not the case for most families. Most families are blended, changed, evolve, are all over the place. But there's anytime you're sort of out of lockstep of what the dream is or the beautiful picture, then there's a sense of like shame around that almost, right? Like my parents are divorced or my parents are this or whatever. And Cinnamon experiences that because, by way of her background, Daisy too. And so, and my parents were foster parents, and that was, a nugget of a germ of inspiration for this story because, you can see all the ways that children and parents become a part of each other's lives, and the way that families come together, and that biological family, of course, is strong and so important. And, blood is a real, tie, but there's also so many other ties, and that we hope that people can use this book to talk about their personal experiences with families and their family of origin and the families they've created, right? Because we have so many different configurations of them. And so we want this to be, a way to celebrate those different configurations.
Yeah. Well, and I do want to say, Kate, and I said this when we sent you the book early, your poems about motherhood got me through my postpartum new mother times. And as we were writing this book, I thought a lot about them, about what does it mean to be a mother in the world? What does it mean to be a woman in the world? And so I just owe you a big thank you for putting those out there, because we talked about it a lot while we were
writing. And I'm also a huge Kate fan, so much so that I feel
wearing my merch,
I actually am wearing a
very
sweatshirt. Which I put it on. I'm like, is this creepy? Is this
I'm very vain. I love it.
Is this too much?
Because
never too much.
I was also going to wear the sweatshirt, but my husband lost my luggage, which I'm going to say at every book event.
Well, it would have been too much if we showed up dressed alike too. So
I did think about that line from what movie, like Wayne's World, I think, where don't show up to the concert in the band t-shirt.
Do you want to do it a little bit? I have more. Well,
Maybe.
while they,
Yeah.
I'll
First, we give it up for Christine and Joe. We're gonna have audience Q&A at this time, so feel free to raise your hand and I will come around with the mic. Start in the back.
Thank you so much for your talk today. It's great hearing about everything. I have a question about something I've been kind of reestablishing my relationship with my mother, and something we've been talking with her about is the idea of the necessity of motherhood with femininity. Like she felt like she couldn't be a woman without motherhood. I wonder what
Oh
your
God, that's
thoughts are
really
on that.
fascinating. Yeah.
Especially with race, because like, you know, she grew up in a very traditional Korean household. So like having this idea like what is a woman and then what is a mother,
Yeah.
kind of attaching that too.
Yeah, I mean, I'll see you answer that question as somebody who's child free. It is really, I think the most striking thing is that you're so outside of what people think the experience of motherhood is or womanhood is, right? That we equate the two. Womanhood, motherhood are the same thing. And I think when you're and it only really hits like in your 30s and above, right? Because it's like through your 20s, people just skate on the idea of like, well, you're gonna have a baby one day, you know. So like you get a pass until then. And then there's gonna be this entree point to where now you're a real woman because you have a mother. I mean, because you've become a mother. And that is so much like a part, like an insidious part of our culture and our society. And, I think it's hard to buck up against that. So it's like I relate to that sentiment. But I think that we need to have examples of all different kinds of womanhood, right? And that you can be a strong woman in the world without having a child. And that feels like a very provocative idea still, right?
I think we have a book recommendation for her.
Oh, which one?
But I
Kate knows
can't
it.
quite get.
Oh,
So,
no. Oh, yes, we do.
yes,
we do.
We
No,
do. We do.
yeah.
So Christine and we became very close while she was editing my book, but also my very close friend was another one of her authors, and her name is Glennis McNichol, and she wrote a beautiful memoir called No One Tells You This. And it is about being a woman in her 40s that is neither married nor has children. And what does a fulfilling life look like if you don't fulfill the fairy tale fantasy that everyone
Or
sets
the
out for a
expectation. I
woman?
don't
Yes,
even,
or the
even if it's not
expectation.
a fantasy. It's like,
But so Christine edited that book, and I have a couple cameos in that book. which-
Damn.
yeah.
a
and,
road
like,
trip.
and it's wonderful. It answers everything that you just asked. And her new memoir, she's finishing it right now, and it is about being in Paris and fulfilling all of your desires by eating all of the delicious food and dating all of the younger men. So
Mhm.
yeah, to come next year.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Thanks for being here.
Of
I'm really enjoying
course.
your talk. And I read your first book because I
thank
was
you.
looking for something that really would have an in-depth, intelligent discussion about race. And it didn't disappoint. And I was wondering how writing that book and these books together have had an impact on your own relationship in terms of race.
Definitely. Yeah. An enormous impact. I mean, Joe and I always say that, we were friends when we started writing together, which was the whole point. I mean, we had a professional relationship that had grown or spilled over, however you want to describe it, into a friendship. But when we started, we are not like them. We were also new friends. We
Which
were
is now crazy to say because it's been 8 years.
Yeah, it's like wild how time flies. But in terms of being an interracial friendship and new friends, like we hadn't had a lot of in-depth, detailed conversations about race in general, our personal experiences, our lives to that point. And so I think both of us thought that or knew that we were going to have to do it, obviously, in writing a book, but we didn't really anticipate how hard it was going to be and to do it in a really fast and furious kind of way, right? Like sometimes these conversations are so fraught. And so you might tiptoe in over years, right? And have these baby steps of conversations, how trust and vulnerability build over time. But we were like, race, go, based on a book deadline. And so that made it like a really intense and also kind of artificial process to have those conversations. But it also was like a good exercise in because we had to do it, we had to do it. And then we had to push through. And so much of our conversations about race in this country in general, between coworkers or at Thanksgiving dinner, what have you, are scenarios where we can have these conversations and kind of tap out and we can or skim the surface or say like, they don't get it. I don't need to talk to them. I'm going to avoid bringing the subject up, et cetera, et cetera. And then we don't have the conversations. And had we not been forced into it, we might have done the same thing. Like we might have said, this is too hard, or like, she doesn't get it, or I don't want to do this. But
We were
because
married at that point.
yeah, we had to do
contractually,
it.
so we had
Yes. and it was worth it, right? So then, some of this is just like making the commitment and intention to keep having these conversations that pushes you, through to the other side. But it wasn't easy.
No, it wasn't. And when we first started having them, I was more hesitant than I thought I would be. I was really worried I was going to say something stupid, or even worse, offensive. And so, I just kind of backed away sometimes. And Christine took that as a shutting down or an unwillingness to approach these. And really, it was just anxiety. And I was scared. And I say that a lot in talks, because I think a lot of white people feel those anxieties in bringing up these conversations. But if we don't say that's the reason we're not having the conversation, then it seems like you're being standoffish, or you don't care, or you don't want to. And once I finally got to the point where I just admitted that, and Christine said, I thought you were being defensive, and that's a shitty thing to see. And when we got there, it was a lot easier, but that was hard. We were both like, there were weeks where we didn't talk. There were tears,
Copious
on
amounts of
both
tears.
sides.
Lots of tears.
And we finally got through that. And the conversation that we had at the tail end of that is, we have to give each other grace. And that's something we say a lot, that I will not always get it right. Neither of us will always get it right. And when we were working on this book, some of the minefields became about motherhood, right? But we have to be there for each other, to just not be afraid to talk. I love your top, by the way.
Oh,
I've
thank
been
you.
looking at it this whole time.
I also read your first book, and Christine, you actually joined our book club, the
Oh,
Flavor Book Club.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course. Oh my God.
And so we had a very heated
We
conversation.
did.
That book. I mean, and it was, we have people, I'm from Philly. So we loved all the Philadelphia scenarios.
so
That's all her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're
It's the
from,
greatest city in America.
I was just waiting. I was like,
I mean,
3,
I've
2, 1.
I've only been here once. Harrisburg seems really lovely so
Another
far.
Philly person.
But yes, Philadelphia.
Mhm.
so
Christine
that
wouldn't
was,
let me set this book in Philly.
she would, okay,
No.
all right. But we really could relate to it.
Mm-hmm.
The description, we all were like, yep, we know exactly where that. So that was
Mm-hmm.
great. But my question for you is, you focus on race a lot, and I do training, some of it DEI, and I'm telling you
Oh.
that, oh my goodness gracious, it makes people spin sometimes, just
Sure
in
does.
talking like microaggressions.
Mhm.
And this is how I was raised, and I didn't know that that was a microaggression. And just getting people to understand that you may not have known, but now you do.
know.
Yeah, you do.
Yep.
And
Now you do.
you made a mistake. You're not a bad person. And so I'm just wondering, did either of you take like training? Did you do? No, you're saying no.
Yeah. No,
Wow.
I mean, I guess, we had corporate trainings. I don't think we've gotten to
I've been in
22.
DEI
Yeah.
corporate
Like, I
training.
mean,
I don't think
anytime you've
anyone's
worked in a
gotten here in that
job,
long.
right? There are
Yeah.
these corporate trainings. But not, I mean, I think our training was really
Trial by fire.
trial by fire. But honestly, I'm going to make a broad generalization here, but I do think it's a lot easier a lot of times for Black people to talk about race, because we've been doing it the heart, right? Like, I grew up, obviously talking about race from the dinner table, and from when I could form words. It's something that, as a Black person in America, it affects your day-to-day life so much that it's an unavoidable way to think about the lens through which you operate. I mean, day in and day out, it's a part of your life. And so I think then when you talking to a person, whoever that might be, I'll use, our dynamic as an example, that doesn't have that fluency, is not used to seeing it that way. That's, I think, when a lot of the friction in D&I programming arises, right? Where you have two groups of people and more, right? When you bring in obviously other races, but that, are way different levels of, comfort and fluency in having these conversations. And so that's why it's been so interesting to do a lot of book clubs, right? And we've done, a lot of all Black book clubs. We've done a lot of all white book clubs, because
Clubs remain very segregated.
exactly
spaces.
like, and
Yeah,
as
yeah.
when America, right? Like, our schools, our work, every place is segregated. And so it's been really interesting to see how those conversations then are different. And we hope that our book, both books, but in particular, We Are Not Like Them, has been a real tool for people to have these kind of conversations, to use their the only way you can really, or we think the only way you can really do it, advance these really intimate conversations and vulnerable conversations, is to be honest about your personal experience and beliefs, and then be okay with it being uncomfortable, and to try to remove the confrontational element from the table. And that's really hard to do. It's really hard, in particular, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of resentment, there's a lot of like, if you don't get this, then this is awful. But we hope that these conversations, at least if you can not hide behind it, I don't want to say, but if you can use the lens of characters, can kind of help it not be as broad.
Yeah, I mean, fiction, I think it's so much easier to be like, I didn't like what that character said or did, instead of I didn't like what
you
Chad
said
in management said.
Yeah.
In the office. I think my mom's a really interesting example of a reader of the book, Tracy. She grew up in a really white area of Denver, moved to like the northern suburbs of Philadelphia. Again, very white, is a teacher, is, an educated, smart woman, but just has not been exposed to very much in the world at all. And she read this book and highlighted things, and then she comes to the book
So
events,
earnest,
and
really
she's
did.
she's so earnest, guys. And she's just like, well, I never saw it like that, or I never
Yeah.
thought about if I said this that someone would take offense at that. And we heard that a lot.
Yeah.
And-
But also, I think it's interesting because I think this is how D&I kind of discussions or workplace discussions spin out, because there's even, Tracy came to an event and said something like that. And it was very sweet. And she was clearly, enlightened, or going through a process. Right. And also, this was like the time period when a lot of people were going through these kind of processes. And one reaction to that could have been like, how did you not know this? Why didn't you understand this? Like, this is, and then you're already like, somebody's trying to learn and grow. And if the reaction they meet with is, well, duh, you should have known this. And, you're a bad person for not understanding that this was a problem, is a vicious cycle that we can get into. And so I think that's just like a little example of, that dynamic that's really easy
it's a
to,
good place to land and to grow. And we have to give people that space to move forward, I think.
We have time for maybe one more question.
So I know this literally just came out, but what's
Yesterday.
next? What's
Yeah,
next?
what's next? Yeah.
Like, do you think you'll continue writing together? And
Oh, we know for a fact. Yeah.
We renewed our vows.
We did.
Actually, at our book event last night, we walked down the aisle together.
Quite accidentally,
Quite
but
accidentally,
it's like
but yeah.
very,
If we have to do
like-
that again, I'd like to do it to the song "The Final Countdown."
oh, obviously. Yes.
We just hit 100 pages of our next book project together.
Yeah.
Called
More
there's
pronouns.
I never knew you at all. And what are we saying about it? Because I don't want to give too many
I
spoilers
know.
away.
It's
This one's not-
about Fallon, do you want to tell it? No, just kidding. I was going to put our publicist on the spot.
publicist be like, what's the elevator pitch, Fallon?
It's I know, neither are we. I mean, we're still in the early
still
stages of this
figuring
book,
out.
but it's basically about an interracial marriage this time. We want to continue to explore race. So it's between a Black woman and a white man. And this white man was raised by his grandfather, and who's now in
He's a
his
rich old white man.
80s. And the grandfather, as we learn in the story, is potentially been implicated in a racially motivated crime situation in the past, some decades before. And so when this comes to be, or this information comes to be learned, and it comes through Simone, our Black character's ex-boyfriend, no less, who has a popular podcast where he investigates these racial crimes from the past, it obviously upends their marriage, and they have to, ask a lot of hard questions about, their relationship, but also, how well do you know people? That's the title. And, what is forgivable, and how culpable people are for the transgressions of their youth, and how far have we really come? And, all those kind of poignant questions. So we'll We have 200 pages to go.
200
So,
pages to go.
so
To be when you will.
yes. And so we'll be back here in 2025.
Best elevator pitch that you've done so far.
Right.
We're
Well,
really
each day we
Yeah.
like Monday, I described it. Tuesday went out. By Friday, I'm going to be like, and then.
We've got to wrap up, but can we give one more round of applause for Christine, Joe, and Kate?
Thank you guys so much.
This is a great conversation. Thank you. We're so happy to sign your books too.
Yeah.
And take pictures.
We love pictures. Yeah. All of the things.
So yes, we'll be having a book signing over on that table over there.
Can we
Books are available for purchase up at the